call, please, and then we're going to start the presentation. I'll introduce the county executive, and they'll start us off for tonight's program. I want to thank everybody tonight for this meeting of the whole that we're hearing tonight. I'd like to introduce our county executive, Jim Cruiser.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Chairman Kavicki, Vice Chairman Brunig, County Board members, Brookside Board of Trustees members, Bob Pitts Chair, Edna Highland, Richard Kessler, past member Gabe Nudo, Ron Johnson now, and John O'Day. But we've been working on this Brookside proposal, as you know, from 2009, 2010 to present. And we're at a point now where I feel very comfortable working with many of you and staff and outside people to bring it forward for an exposure on it. And I wanted to do it tonight as opposed to wait until October when the budget's presented. I'd also like to welcome the many Brookside employees who are here. For without they and their management team, we wouldn't be the five-star, great quality nursing home that we are today. As you will learn tonight, this proposal has been thoroughly vetted and studied, and what we bring you tonight is a draft plan. Please feel free to make comments, ask questions. What I would ask you to do is ask questions at the end of the presentation, because I think many of your questions will be answered by the end. We will take as much time as you want to answer them tonight. We'll meet in between now and October 5th to answer more, and all through the budget process to answer more. So please, this is a living, breathing process. There's a lot of information tonight, but feel free to ask questions at the end. I think we're going to try to use your time wisely. And so I think that's everything I need to cover right here. I just wanted to also feel free to write down any questions. If you feel more comfortable emailing them, we'll be happy to take care of that. Now I'd like to introduce Fran Petrick, the administrator at Brookside Care Center, to begin the presentation. Fran?
Thank you, Jim. Wow, that's very special. Thank you very much. And good evening to everyone. It's very exciting for me to stand before you and begin this presentation because we have some very exciting times for Brookside coming up in the future. Oh, I have to do my clicker. I got it upside down last time, so let's hope this. But you see the title to our presentation is called Brookside Care Center, Building Toward Our Future. So that might give you a hint of what we're going to talk about tonight. I know a lot of the supervisors here are very much aware of Brookside because they've served on committees that oversee Brookside, but I know we have new supervisors and also supervisors who haven't been on committees or are that closely knowledgeable about it. So I just wanted to go over a few things. We are a skilled nursing home, and we are licensed for 154 beds. We're also Medicare and Medicaid certified, and we have a 98% occupancy rate. And when you look at all of the nursing homes in Kenosha County, there's 9 of them. If you add all the occupancy rates up, their occupancy rate is 70%. So we're a very, very highly occupied and sought-after nursing home. We have over 200 full and part-time employees, and we've been serving Kenosha County residents in some type of fashion. You know, the type of health care has changed over the years, but since 1915. So we have a very long history, coming up on 100 years. Our vision, the vision of Brookside, is to be a world-class provider of person-directed care for those who require short-term rehabilitation as well as long-term care services by offering a continuum of services to clients to access when needed and to remain autonomous and connected. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not clicking. Everybody's clicker doesn't work. No.
If you hit that arrow.
Okay. All right, well, the clicker doesn't work. You can check it, Lori, but,
You can just use that arrow.
right, I'll use the arrow. Our mission at Brookside is committed to enhancing the quality of life for the clients by respecting each individual's rights and assisting them to reach their highest potential of health and independence. And we focus on the details to ensure safe and competent delivery of services with the client in the center of all decision-making. By living this mission, we are able to remain the nursing home and rehabilitation center of choice in the community. Now, you can take my word for it that we're the nursing home and rehabilitation center of choice in the community, or you can take the Kenosha News and their readers, because the last 2 years we were selected as best in Kenosha, and we really feel that's a high honor because we serve a lot of the residents and they chimed in on that. So, or you could also take U.S. World and News Report. We've been named for the last 2 years as one of the best nursing homes in the nation. And we enjoy as County Exec mentioned, we do enjoy a 5-star rating. Okay, thanks, Lori. And that is only 20% of the nursing homes in the nation have a 5-star rating. 5 is the highest you can get. So why are we here tonight? There's a couple questions when we're planning for the future. We're looking at positioning for the future. And as consumers' wants and needs change, as payer sources like Medicare and Medicaid might get modified, and as our building continues to age, we have to ask ourselves, how can we continue to have the market share? How can we attract new business? How can we continue to be the lead provider of long-term care services? And how do we continue to be profitable? Now, there's a lot of lingo in long-term care and there's a lot of acronyms, so I just want to refresh people that Medicare is the payer source that is for short-term rehab. And Medicare is our best payer source, and the revenue exceeds our cost by $381 a day. Medicaid is our poorest payer source, and the revenue is short by $136 a day. And the other revenue we have is private pay, and we price our private pay rates to be break even. And our private pay people are about less than 30 in our nursing home. 30 people in the nursing home a day. A CBRF is a type of assisted living, and it stands for Community-Based Residential Facility. And clients who live in a CBRF require less than 3 hours of nursing home or nursing care a day. And there's much less regulation. An SNF, which is what Brookside is licensed skilled nursing facility. It's highly regulated, and we have 154 beds. Memory care is a term that's being used for clients who have impairments in their memory, like Alzheimer's dementia. A continuum is an organization that offers assisted living and skilled nursing so clients can receive services across the continuum without having to make a dramatic move. And an RCAC is another type of assisted living, and it stands for Residential Care Apartment Complex. And that's a higher functioning senior that lives there, and they pay for a menu of services. Usually they have the living with a kind of an apartment like with a kitchen. Excuse me. So looking toward the future, how can Brookside continue to remain viable in the next 5, 10, 15, and 15 more years on? What type of services are the consumers of the future going to want? And how do we need to position ourselves to remain the provider of choice? What are the trends in long-term care? And can we remain a standalone nursing home and financially survive? These are some of the questions we have to ask ourselves. So back in 2010, seems just like yesterday, WIPFLi did a feasibility and marketing analysis for us, and they presented their findings to the county board in February of 2011. And they gave us a big book, but the two key things to come away with that market and feasibility study is it did confirm that Brookside is the provider of choice, and it also notes that there's room in the Kenosha market for CBRF beds, and especially CBRFs that specialize in memory care. WIPFLi also identified some living environment trends, and when I say living trends, it's things that are happening in the future because of what consumers want and demand. They're saying that more standalone facilities, which Brookside is, are expanding to a continuum for more financial and market security. And facilities are adopting principles of culture change and incorporating those into their care models. And I'll explain a little bit more on what culture change means. Neighborhood concepts are being created, and they're more inviting, and they allow an easier transition for culture change. And generally, standalone facilities are at a higher financial risk because of their exposure to market changes and challenges. Continuums have more units to cover overhead costs, which will help increase our financial flexibility. And by adding an assisted living community-based residential facility to our campus, will increase the overall value of Brookside monetarily, and it will also increase the service that we provide to our Kenosha County citizens. Now, I told you I'd explain the culture change movement a little bit more. Culture change movement is not something that's just in Kenosha or southeastern Wisconsin. This is a nationwide movement that is shaping our industry today. It is what all providers of long-term care services really need to pay attention to because it's consumer-driven. It's a shift from the medical model to a social model. A medical model is viewed as very sterile and institutionalized, and a social model focuses more on creating a home-like environment and maximizing resident choice. So when WIPFLi looked at our facility and did the study, they said that a neighborhood concept is something that is part of culture change. And a neighborhood concept creates a smaller, more home-like feel. And the dining areas are not large and expansive. They're smaller and more home-like. The therapy areas are dedicated and created in the nursing home that caters to the residents who need rehab. And the nurses' stations are located in the living environments rather than a big centralized nursing station. And I just enclosed some pictures. The top picture is our current dining area, and the bottom picture represents a neighborhood concept dining area, which I think looks very, very home-like and inviting. The top picture is our current therapy area, and the bottom picture is a large and expansive therapy area. The top picture is our centralized nursing station, which serves 4 wings or 94 residents. And that becomes very problematic because, you know, there's 4 or 5 nurses up there, and the residents are at the nurse's station trying to talk to the nurse. The nurse is on the phone with the doctor trying to explain the condition to the residents of the resident and trying to get orders. It's noisy, and there's really no privacy. And we have to be very, very careful that we're not mentioning names and medical conditions, and it's not a good situation at all. But in the culture change type movement nursing home, the nursing homes are the nursing stations are decentralized, and they're located in the neighborhood, you know, so that the staff is in the neighborhood with the residents, not down the hall, you know, sitting at that nurse's station. So who are the new consumers? Well, it's the baby boom generation. I'm a baby boomer, and I see lots of baby boomers in this audience. And that's not, I mean, that's great, okay? But the baby boomers and the new consumers, they value individuality. And the rehab clients, when they come in for rehab, they do not want to live in the same space as the long-term care clients because they feel they're different. And even though we might have an 85-year-old patient rehabbing, they still feel they're different than the 84-year-old who's here for long-term care because they're getting out. I mean, that's how they feel. And they believe in individual choices and freedoms. Now like I said, this is a nationwide movement, and this is an article will be included in your packet, but it comes from the Business and Marketing Design. And on the corner where it says lessons learned, it says to keep on top of changes, keep your finger on the pulse of what is happening with your younger residents, because that will really impact your facility in the future. And to stay focused on current trends. And provide the patients with the amenities they need. And when I talk about amenities, I mean they want flat screen TVs, they want telephones, they want to be hooked up to their wireless devices or wired devices. They want a large room, stuff that we would all want if we had to be in that position. So we were built 20 years ago, and you might be asking yourself, yeah, okay, so what's changed from 20 years ago? Because that's really not that long ago. Well, our therapy space 20 years ago was probably more than adequate because we didn't do the rehab business that we do today. We may have had 8 Medicare patients 20 years ago. So that was probably like being in the Taj Mahal because it was so large, our therapy. Today, we have increased that Medicare business by 7-fold. 20 years ago, we didn't have computers. Now everybody has a computer. Every nurse has to have a computer. Our nurse aides do charting on computers, but we didn't build the space to handle computers. I mean, so they're kind of stacked up in corners trying to do their work. Our medical records are kept electronically. So again, that's computers. Years ago, patients were generally moved from their bed to the chair or wheelchair to bed with the good old-fashioned brawn of the nursing assistants, picking them up and lifting them, putting them in bed, etc. Today, we don't do that anymore. Today, back then, they maybe had 1 or 2 lifts in the whole facility. Today, we have 2 or 3 lifts on every single unit, because our staff is not expected to be doing that heavy lifting. Back then, we had adequate storage space. But when you think about the advancement in medical technology, the patients have a lot more equipment, and we have a lot more equipment. We have IV stands, we have IV pumps, we have food tube feeding pumps, we have suction pumps, we have vacuum pumps for wounds. We have oxygen concentrators. We have vital sign machines. There's just equipment, and we don't have the space to store it, but it's necessary medical equipment that we need to take care of our patients. And just a regular amount of patient supplies has increased. We're required to do something by the federal government, which is called an MDS, and that's actually how we get paid. Well, years ago, we didn't have to do an MDS, and we didn't have to have staff to do it. But because of a large amount of patients that we have, and last year we had 488 admissions, we have to have staff to do MDSs, but we don't have offices to put them. Also, we have nurse practitioners and other physician extenders. Again, there's no place for them. So the current conditions at Brookside, we have long halls. We have no social space on those halls. We actually did, but that's where the staff had to take over to do their work. Our meals are served in a big, giant dining room from a menu that's already set, and at times where you show up because this is mealtime. And we have a central nursing station that gives us no privacy. And our rehab clients do live with the long-term clients. And our rehab space is just terribly overcrowded. And we have all private bedrooms, though, all private rooms. When the county board And the design team 20 years ago built Brookside. That was just the smartest thing they could have done, was build private rooms, because nursing homes and our competition are still trying to figure out how can we get private rooms, you know, without having to reduce our census. So that was a brilliant idea. Here's a picture of our long institutional hallways. This is one of our social spaces, but this serves 3 wings. So why is change needed? First of all, to remain financially viable and not dependent on Kenosha County taxpayers. Change is needed to address the new consumer of the future, which is the baby boomers. We need to change so we can maintain our market share, and it is a competitive environment. We need to have an ability to increase outpatient therapy. And we need to, and this is very important, we need to be able to provide care for our traditional long-term clients, which is the typical long-term people, usually on Medicaid in our nursing home. And we need to be able to continue to do that in the nursing home because that is part of our mission. But by being able to do that, by increasing our Medicare, because remember, Medicaid we lose money on, as we increase our Medicare, we're able to keep that Medicaid census in our building. We need to change because our rehab is overflowing. We have the Southport room right across from it, and rehab is in there now because there's just not enough room. And frankly, the residents do complain about the cramped conditions. Here's an example of our rehab in the hallway and how congested it is. Here's the Southport room, and you can see all the business going on in there. So to continue to talk about why change is needed, I think I stressed it that our rehab space is too small to accommodate our current Medicare census and our anticipated Medicare census. And this is a very important note. The reason that we are off the levy today and last year, and we've been working on this, the reason we're off the levy is because we were able to grow our Medicare census. I think when I started it was 16, and we were able to grow our Medicare census to where my 14 budget is 37. So that's how we got off the levy, and every time we do the budget, we're trying to bump up that Medicare census so we can continue to be financially independent. Well, there's a ceiling on it. You know, we can't have so many Medicares in our, rehab patients when we are so short of staff. So short of space, I'm sorry. So, and the important thing to remember is that building that Medicare census has resulted in a zero levy dependence. So just recapping, there's no room to accommodate added staff. Our single offices have been made into double offices. Our meeting rooms have been made into offices. Our classroom has been made into offices. We had a clinic office for doctors. That's made an office now, a regular office. And overcrowding is not conducive to a good work environment or employee satisfaction. And we're so stuck right now. The only opportunity we have to add an extra space is if we take a patient room and turn it into offices. Here's one of on the hallways, we have social space that was designed for the residents 20 years ago, but our staff is doing their charting, and you see a vital sign machine, a lift, because we don't have a space to put them. So they have to be just tucked in different spots where we can get them. This is our training room, now an office. We do almost all the training for Gateway for nurse aid students. They all come to Brookside. We have Herzing University nursing students come to Brookside. Gateway nursing students come to Brookside. We don't have a single classroom. So after the market study, we started a process of architect engagement. And this is where the conceptual design phase began. After a request for qualifications in September of 2012, we selected Epstein Ewan Architects. And on October 29th, a collaborative visioning exercise was held at Brookside with Brookside staff, a mixture of county staff, looking at what we need for the future, where do we need to go, what do we have that's good right now. And during this process, they explored the benefits and drawbacks of adding a community-based residential facility or a residential apartment complex, or downsizing the current nursing home and renovating our existing space. And for all of these, we obtained financial projections for these scenarios, and WIPFLi helped us do that. We actually looked at 12 options of all of these different designs. And every one of them, we did a financial feasibility and a construction budget model to see what it would look like. We also did phasing diagrams because we're not going to go, like when you moved Brookside before, you took the old Brookside people and you put them over here in the new Brookside, and it was a one-day affair. In this case, because we're going to build, we're not going to have a place to move everybody into, so we're going to have to phase moving people in and out, and it's critical that we do this without affecting our census, which means revenue. So for each design, financial models were developed. We incorporated construction costs, census decline, staffing changes. Phasing options were developed to determine when construction would be completed and where the patients would move. And then another very important model that we developed was called the status quo model, the do-nothing model, because somebody is going to say, what do we have to do anything for? We're making money right now, I don't understand. So Lori and the team in finance did a status quo model, and that will give us a look at what happens if we do nothing. So the final recommendations are to, number one, renovate the existing nursing home. Use the available land that we have and construct a 48-bed rehab facility. It'll be 2 stories. And connected to that, we will put the CBRF, the Community-Based Residential Facility. Both of these 2 are making money. 48-bed rehab makes money. 24-bed CBRF makes money. I don't know if you know or remember, but we did purchase the house that's immediately east of Brookside, and we plan to demolish that. So as far as renovating the existing skilled nursing facility, this is the place where our long-term residents will continue to reside. We will still have a nursing home, a skilled nursing home. But we will address the space shortages, and we'll address the consumer demands of what they want by offering more choices, a more enhanced living space, and a more home-like environment. So what will it entail to remodel the nursing home? We're going to try as much as we can with this space to make more of the neighborhood concepts, to locate more social space on every neighborhood area, to put the nurses' stations and staff space in that neighborhood so they're close to the clients, to create dining areas that are more home-like, new flooring, update shared bathrooms, and energy-efficient lighting and painting where needed. Building the new 48-bed rehab center, again, we're using our own land right next door to us. It will be 2 stories, and this will help us be able to continue to grow the Medicare base. Because as I mentioned before, we really are topped out because of our space shortage. So we'll be able to make sure we can continue growing that Medicare, and we'll be able to respond to the needs of the new consumers, the baby boomers. And we'll build a new 24-bed community-based residential facility. Now, I just looked at our census today. Excuse me 1 second. just discharging out of our own nursing home, as of August 19th, we already discharged 24 patients to community-based residential facility. And it's important to note that, because many residents, when they're discharged, I wish I could stay at Brookside. I wish you had a place where I could go, because they get familiar with the staff. They love our facility because we just give absolutely top-notch care. So just to show you, 24 people we already discharged to somebody else's CBRF. So this will allow people to age in place, and it will allow people, it will give us more financial flexibility. It will generate additional revenue. And very important, it's going to provide more services to the Kenosha County citizens who use our service. Last year, we had 488 admissions. And we're trending right now this year to 530 something. And over the next year, we'll demolish the house that was purchased next door, just making it available for future expansion, parking, etc. So why this makes sense? We're responding to the market and consumer demand. We're going to remain financially independent and off the county tax rolls. We'll have a positive cash flow. We're going to improve the conditions for the residents who are living at Brookside. We're going to reduce our exposure to the changing markets by establishing a continuum. We will address space shortages, and we'll have room to grow that Medicare business. Medicare contributes $381 a day. Medicaid loses $136 a day per patient, and private pay is priced to break even. So what are the deliverables with proceeding with this project? Financially, it will be self-sustaining. Financially, it will be self-sustaining. We will serve the need for increased memory care population in our community, and it will allow us to grow the Medicare and rehab business in the population for years to come, and it will allow us to provide even more care for Kenosha County citizens in the future. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you to the board for your consideration. Thank you to Jim Cruiser for actually living our mission of being a world-class provider. And thank my team out here. They are the absolute best team I have ever worked with, or ever anybody could work with. So thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Mike is going to do this.
Hello, I am Mike Oates. I'm an architect with Epstein Ewan Architects, and thank you very much for having me here tonight. It's a great project, and it's great to present it to you. I've been working with Fran, as she says, for the past 2 years, and her staff, and over that time we developed 12 different concepts, probably, 120 pages of drawings. And through that process, we met with her staff, had visioning sessions, and it was just amazing to see the passion that her and her staff have for the residents. Care for the residents, improving their quality of life is what really formed the concept that we're going to see before us today. And staff efficiencies, those are some of the key driving factors in what developed this concept. So I will go right into the final concept we developed after the initial 11. Right here is this is a context aerial photograph. The house that was purchased is right here. This is the lot. I'll use the cursor if you want to look at the screen to show you where features are. The property line goes here, here, along the backside, down here, and along the highway here. The existing facility is this white building located here with the central area and the radiating resident wings. There is a loop road that goes around here, existing current, and this loop road basically outlines the buildable area of the site. Everything inside that loop is relatively level, and that's where the existing building is and where the future building will take place also. There are some buildable areas outside of the loop which are down the bluff slightly. These will be used for stormwater management because some of that will be required with the new building areas being added. The river below here, the blue area is actually the floodplain. The water is not actually that wide. And this area in here is a wetland area, so that's delineated with a lighter shade. So that's the general context. Gateway Tech is up in this area, and Bradford High School is over here. Then here's the concept plan that we did develop with Fran and her staff. There we go. So here's the existing entry to the campus. That will remain in place. We have a drop-off loop here. That remains in place. There will be parking located in the lot, the residential lot that was purchased. That will be used for parking, and a storage garage will be located on the back side of the parking area. The existing loop around the perimeter will remain in place. There'll be some parking added here, which is a lighter shade along the access loop. Also here, there'll be a new parking lot added in here between the existing building and the new rehab center, which will be here. The loop will continue. It will connect to a new entry here with parking and a drop-off loop for the rehab center and the CBRF. That was critical to create its own identity, and as Fran said, people that use the rehab center don't necessarily want to feel like they're part of the rest of the facility. So it has its own identity, own drop-off. We'll start in the rehab center. Right here in this pink area, we're using, first of all, for the floor plan, we're using the household model, which Fran had mentioned in her presentation. It's more of a home feel. In the purple or in the pink areas, there'll be 12 residents per area, so 12 in this area, 12 in this area, for a total of 24 on this floor. In the middle, there'll be a dining space, a living space, and staff nursing space. So the central large nursing stations are broken up, and there'll be smaller nursing locations in each household. So that helps to with resident interaction and staff interaction. So that floor plan concept will be copied to the floor above for another 24 units. So there'll be a total of 48 units of rehab in this footprint right here in the household model. The existing 300 wing in the existing building currently has resident rooms. That will be converted into the rehab gym in this yellow area, and then rehab support areas in the two green areas. So together with the 300 wing conversion and the rehab center, 2 stories here, that will be the rehab component of the project. Connecting the rehab building to the CBRF will be a drop-off for parking, or a drive-through drop-off, a connector that goes to the rehab and to the CBRF. The CBRF, which is community-based residential facility, will have 12 resident rooms again in this pink area, 12 here, for a total of 24, and a central staff area with living, dining, and nursing support areas in this area. And we found that 12 residents per wing for a total of 24 was the optimal staffing ratio. So that's why that was adopted for the building footprints and the development of the households. Then we go into the existing building. This is the 100 and 200 wing currently. Those are their names or numbers. The resident rooms in these corridors will receive new flooring, new paint, plumbing fixtures in their current locations, basically light remodeling. So that will be happening in this corridor and this corridor. There will also be staff space added mid-wing, again, to reinforce the household concept and enforce interaction between the staff and the residents. There is currently a courtyard, enclosed courtyard here that will be built in to become living space, dining space, and again, nursing space will be in this area also. So that's what we will call a household. 2 wings of the existing building and a central common space. So again, the household concept. Then we have 2 more households at the top of the existing facility. We have the 400 and 500 wings. Mid-wing will be adding resident function space and staff space, again, to reinforce interaction. And these two wings, the 400 and the 500 wing, will go together and will have central living and dining space along with nursing support staff space. So that will be the second household in the existing facility. The third will be the 600 and 700 wings, and it will be the same concept. We'll have, again, resident rooms, light remodeling, and a central space. Then here's a diagram just to show where new construction is taking place and where renovation is taking place. Everything that is orange is new construction. So right here is the 2-story rehab center, 48 units. There's the connector with the drive-through drop-off right here that connects to the 24-unit, 1-story CBRF. And all of this is new drive and drop-off and parking. And again, that was to create a separate identity for this portion of the building, so it has its own entry and own identity. There'll also be some infill areas between the existing wings here, here, and here to help create the common space for the households. And here is the existing courtyard that will be infilled to create this common space. The resident wings, where the resident rooms are shown with the light blue color. That's light limited remodeling. Again, that's just flooring, painting, and some plumbing updates. So that's common for all 6 wings. The resident rooms will receive that. The common spaces at each end will receive heavier remodeling as the staff is decentralized and located into each household. And the mid portion of the building will also receive extensive renovation for the administrative office areas. This area is the chapel and the dining area. That will receive light remodeling and will generally remain as it is. Okay, here we are zooming in on 2 of the households, the 2 northern households, the 400-500 household and the 600-700 household. Again, the concepts, these are existing resident rooms, and as Fran pointed out, they are private rooms, which was great foresight. We don't see that often, so it's great that they're common or single rooms. Then common space will be added mid-wing. This will be resident area and staff support areas, along with the living area here and the dining area here. Caregiver support is the green areas, so we tried to provide that in several different locations so the staff and the residents can interact. And same concept up this wing, and this household would be the same concept also. And here's just zooming in a bit on the mid-wing features that will be added. We'll be adding a bathing and grooming area for the residents. Here's where they'll go for their daily baths and daily grooming activities. There'll also be an open space here where they could have other activities, meeting with other residents or with the staff. Here will be a storage area. As Fran mentioned, there are very limited locations for storage in the building right now, so any place we could find to put storage, we did. So there are many storage spaces, linen and storage wherever we had an empty space. And this will be for charting and staff. Okay, and here is generally the same concept for the 100 and 200 wings. Resident rooms existing with light remodeling, mid-wing staffing functions. Again, this area gets infilled. It's an existing outdoor courtyard right now. We'll infill that. We'll create a living area. There'll be a dining area. And again, the dining areas are smaller dining areas per household. So we're getting away from the large dining area, which is more institutional. So it's more of a home feel. So each household will have its own dining space. And again, caregiver support areas are scattered throughout the area, just so there's maximum interaction. This is the central portion of the building that all the resident wings radiate from. Again, here's the chapel in the dining room. These areas will remain where they are and their current functions. The dining room will be used for activities and other common functions. The administrative area is currently here, but it will be renovated for new configurations and will be expanded over to this area, which is currently the rehab space, which will be moved. Rehab will be moved over to here to open this whole front up for administrative areas. Because as Fran said, they have staff working in storage rooms and training rooms, I think. So this will help quite a bit, give them quite a bit more administrative space up front. And the classroom could actually be used for a classroom. There's a room there right now, but it's not used for its intended purpose. But now it can be with the additional space that's being added. And here's a closer view of the rehab gym in this area, and there'll be support areas for that right here. This is a 3D image of what we just saw in plan, just to give you an idea of the scale and the feel of the buildings that we're talking about. So right here is the existing central portion of the existing building. The resident wings are radiating out from that. So this is the 400, 500, 600, and 700 wing, so the two households we had talked about. The infill between the wings is right here. That gives us the additional space for the common spaces between the resident wings. On this side, we have the 100 and 200 wing, and that's the third household that we had talked about in the existing building. There, this is the existing courtyard that will be infilled and become the living and common space for that household. Here's the 300 wing, which is going to be converted into the rehab support areas in the gym. This is the 2-story rehab, and for this building, we envision it would be brick and siding to match the existing character of the building, and a gabled roof form with asphalt shingles. So we're trying to tie in with the context of what's in place already, so it seems like a seamless campus. So this will be 2 stories here. Then we have the 1-story connector and the drive-through drop-off. Here is the 1-story CBRF, and again, the siding would be brick and siding material and windows to match the existing character of the buildings, and a gabled roof form with asphalt shingles. So we have cohesive design throughout the campus. Here's another view, gives you a better view. This is the image looking east. Here's the new entry coming in with parking and the individual drop-off here, and you can get a feel for this being an individual entry where you'll feel like you're part of a different building. It's all new construction here that you're going to be seeing, and a new drop-off area. So this is the CBRF over here, and this is the 2-story rehab center. Here's another view just showing the northern wings of the existing resident areas with the infill that will be happening there to create the additional common spaces. And back here in the 100 and 200 wings, that's the infill of the existing courtyard. Then here's a phasing plan. You know, we come up with a concept, now we have to figure out how to get everyone into the new construction and moved around without affecting the resident census or the staffing. So the key here is yellow is in progress and gray is completed. So in phase 1, we will be constructing the rehab center, the connector, and the CBRF. So that we estimate will take 12 months to construct those 2 buildings and the connector. With those 2 buildings, we will have 72 resident rooms that can be occupied. So for phase 2, we'll move people from the 600 and 700 wing into the rehab center, into those 48 units, and we'll move the people out of the 300 wing into the CBRF. So that frees up 3 wings that can be renovated for phase 2. So we assume that will take about 8 months. The next phase, you can see the new construction, everything gray is complete. So the rehab, the CBRF, the 300 wing, the 600 and 700 wing are all complete. We would move the residents out of the 400, 500 wings into 600 and 700 and renovate those 2 wings, or household as we were calling them. So that's phase 3, and we estimate that would take 6 months. Then we move the residents from the 100 and 200 wings up here into the 400 and 500 wings, and we renovate those 2 wings in the central common space, and we also renovate the central administrative area of the building. And that is estimated to take 10 months. So when you get here, all the construction is completed, all shown gray, and the total duration of the project is 3 years. So that is what we estimate for that. And next we will have the operational forecast.
So, my name is Lori Staves, and I'm the CFO for Human Services. And my job tonight is to start giving you the numbers. And it is a fun job. Who said it wasn't, but it is. So, Fran alluded to that the very first thing when we started this process was to review what if we do nothing? What is our future going to look like? So what we thought was we would put together our status quo census mix. And Medicare, as it's been said before tonight, that we would be capped pretty much at 41. That's an average daily census. And that's because of our space limitations. Currently, we would have managed care at 3 patients a day, private pay 29, Medicaid at 76. So our average daily census would look like 149. When we ran those numbers and put together a forecast, we found that the expenses quickly outpaced our revenues without growing that Medicare census. So on the bottom half of the slide, you can see in 2016, we begin to show that deficit of just a little bit more than $500,000. And then every year after that, for 5 years, that grows. So for a total 5-year levy impact, it's just under $8 million. So that means that Brookside would be requesting tax levy, and they haven't done that for a few years. So the 2015, the future of doing nothing means that we would have a levy request of just under the $8 million. I didn't go any further after 2020, but we can just pretty much sure that that will increase every year after that and grow. So we've talked about the financial models, and there were a lot. Throughout the 2-year process, we worked with 2 of the most knowledgeable experts in long-term care costing. WIPFLi, who was mentioned before, we used them back in 2010 to do our market survey, and we continued that association, and we've worked very closely with them on the costing of all the various options. We also consulted with Brian Chanik from Leading Age Wisconsin, and Leading Age Wisconsin is a statewide association whose members are nonprofit long-term care organizations. So together we worked on several costing options, but to give you an idea, here on the slide, number 1 is we looked at creating a 48-bed rehab and just renovating the existing residential area. And that resulted in a future loss. And then we took number 1 and we added a 24-bed standalone CBRF, not connected to our existing building, and that resulted in a loss. Then we took the 48-bed rehab and the renovation of the existing area, but we downsized our nursing home beds from 154 to 117 because that would make us the ability to convert 2 of our wings to a 20-bed CBRF. And that actually gave us a loss eventually. So we took that concept and said, okay, let's add a 12-bed standalone RCAC, which is the apartment complex. And that didn't work either. So finally, the recommended financial model that you are seeing tonight was developed. So just as a repeat, that the financial model is based upon a new 2-story, 48-bed rehab with a very large therapy area and a separate main entrance. There is a 24-bed community-based residential facility, a CBRF, and that is connected to the existing building, as you saw in the architectural plans. And that, having it be connected, we took advantage of administrative, staff, and financial shared resources that way. Fran had alluded to that a continuum of care, we have more overhead can be spread across different revenue sources, and that's what's happening with this model. So we're going to renovate the existing residential and community areas to create that more home-like environment, and that was so we can keep up for our future market share of the baby boomer generations and what they're expecting when they hit this area of their life. And then we're going to renovate the staff and office areas to accommodate the added staff that has been, we have been accumulating, and the additional meeting and training areas, and to provide the private areas for those visiting physicians and nurse practitioners. So the forecast also has a 20-year debt service, and it will all be paid in 20 years with operational income. There is no tax levy included in this forecast. In the black italics in 2013, if you can recall, Brookside Care Center had excess revenues of approximately $600,000 plus at the end of last year. And through June 30th of 2014, they are showing excess revenues of 200 plus. And that is above and beyond their budgeted operational revenue return of $785,000. So it could actually come at the end of this year close to just under $1 million return altogether for Brookside. So then we thought we'd give you a look at what our projected 20-year census growth would look like. So in 2015, Medicare 41, which is really our cap because of our space limitations, would grow at the end of the 20 years to 60 a day. So we go from 41 to 60 being served on an average daily census. That's a 46% growth. And Medicare, remember, contributes $381 a day to our bottom line. That helps offset our other costs. We were very conservative and did not put in an increase for managed care. And for private pay, we put a slight increase going from 29 per day to 31. Creating that neighborhood concept will attract more people. They will like to be in that type of environment. And private pay, again, is priced to break even. And then Medicaid will take up the difference then. And Medicaid, remember, loses $136 a day. So my last slide. So the estimated cost of this construction is broken down into these 4 line items. First of all, it's our new 48-bed rehab, which is approximately estimated at $7.8 million. We have a new 24-bed CBRF, which is about $4.4. And updating the existing SNF or our nursing home area is $4.3, and we're updating that is to create that more home-like neighborhood concept. And that was because of the trends of our future market share. This is what people will be expecting. And the 4th line here says major capital repairs for existing area 1.7. We actually looked at the next 3 to 5 years, what we would have to do no matter what to that building. As everybody had said, it's 20 years old. So things would need to be replaced. And this would be in our CIP plan no matter what, whether we expand or whether we do nothing. So we thought we would include that into this project. And it's estimated to be about $1.7 million. So the total project cost then is $18.2. And when you receive your informational book tonight, at the end of the copy of the PowerPoint slides, you will see, and finance always has large paper, small numbers, but you will see 3 sheets. And this gives 20 years of our forecast. So you'll have one for the CBRF for each year. You'll have another one for the SNF area, the nursing home area. And then we combined both of them so that you can see them totally combined. Now, I could sit here and go through every year, But you'll also see an assumption column so that you know what we've used assumptions going forward on increases. You'll see rates that we've estimated, and you'll see average daily census for every year for the next 20 years. But since we have little time tonight, the bottom portion of this slide kind of recaps those 3 sheets for you. So the first one is a total 20-year net income prior to the debt service. And we've allocated this between the SNF and the CBRF. So in green is our nursing home, which total 20-year net income positive 26.6 million. The CBRF would be at 10.9 million for a combined 37.5 million. Then we have the 20-year debt service, and this is including principal, interest, and any issuance costs. So they're allocated based upon the construction costs. So for SNF, it's approximately 19.8 for their debt service, and for the CBRF, it's 6.3. So then we have the total 20-year net income after the debt service. So everything is paid, debt service and all the expenses and revenues, and the SNF is showing a 6.7 million. But the CBRF adds 4.6 million to that bottom line, so we have 11.3. The next line where it says total operating contribution during construction, 3.5 million. During that construction, you heard that we'll be phasing people and moving them from wing to wing. So we do have to we have to keep a few beds open during that phasing process. And open beds means less revenue. So during the construction period, we will have some deficits, and you will see that in that costing in the large spreadsheets. So they'll be producing some losses just during that construction period. And has been, what we've done in the past is created, first, similar capital projects that we've had, is to create a sinking fund, and the deficits will be carried in that sinking fund and paid back over the first few years after construction and when we become 100% occupied. So there's no external funds used for these deficits. And you'll hear a little bit more about this in the next presenter. So bottom line, even after we take care of those first few years of deficits, we have a total 20-year net cash flow of $7.8 million. So in conclusion, I want to emphasize that there's no county levy included in any of this forecast, any of the 20-year forecast. And once again, Brookside Care Center can be self-sustaining and not rely on any taxpayer levy. And it'll provide, this expansion project will provide for more services for Kenosha County. So next, I want to introduce Mike Harrigan. He's from Ellers, and he will be reviewing the capital financing plan.
Thank you very much, Lori. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, County Supervisors, for giving me the chance to be here and talk this evening. You're going to be glad to know that I'm in the home stretch of our presentation this evening. But I think you'll be interested to hear about the capital finance plan portion of this. You've heard about the need as to the facility. You heard about the design that was brought forward for the facility. You've heard about the estimates associated with the forecast for the operations of the facility. And so my part of the presentation is to talk to you about the plan of capital finance. How's the money going to be raised for this thing, and how are you going to be paying for it? And how does that fit within the overall game plan that you have developed for all the needs of the county in terms of your capital finance? Because this is one project of many projects that you're responsible for, and of course you're going to want to know how this all fits in the big picture. What I want to do is talk a little bit about the way we went about thinking about this thing. And one of the things that we were sure that you wanted to do if you decide to proceed with this, is to find a way to raise the money in the least expensive way possible. Now, there are several ways that you can go about raising money for the project like this. You can use what you've traditionally used in the past, which is general obligation bond financing. You can use revenue bond financing, and there's lease forms of financing. But I can tell you that the most cost-effective, the least expensive way to do it is to use your general obligation borrowing authority. What this means is that the ultimate underlying security for payment of the bonds is the payment of a property tax in the event that there are no other revenues to make that payment. However, when you use GO bonds, you have the ability to abate that tax levy from other revenues of an enterprise such as this one to pay that cost. So it was very gratifying to understand, and that's why you just heard this presentation from Lori, to demonstrate the fact that there is going to be enough money coming in net of your operating costs to make the payments on the debt service annually, so that it is not expected that you would have to raise property taxes to pay for one bit of this project. We're going to show you a little bit about some of these numbers, and when you get your folders, you'll be able to study it more fully. But the other benefits of using general obligation debt are, number one, it's the lowest form of financing because of fees. You pay less costs for all the consultants involved in it. Secondly, the interest rates are lower because of the fact that it's a more secure form of financing. Thirdly, when you use other forms of borrowing, like a revenue bond, you have to borrow additional money and fund a reserve fund for security. So in the case of this project, you'd be adding about $1.8 million because you add about 10% to the size of the issue, and you have to pay interest on that. That money's set aside in case there's any shortfall in revenue cash flow. And finally, when you do a revenue bond, you've got to have a certain level of debt service coverage that doesn't come into play for a general obligation. So overall, it's clearly going to be the least expensive form of capital. Now, another thing here that's real important, we know. Let me just say, I'm going to digress a second and say something a little bit personal, and that is that I am now going into my 21st year with my company, Ehlers and Associates. We're very proud of the fact that we've had the privilege of serving this county for all of the time that I've been a part of it. Something that you might not be aware of is the fact that when I came in here as a greenhorn with a mentor, some of you know this guy, whose name was Seeger Swanson, that was the lead financial advisor years ago. One of the first projects that I had the opportunity to serve you on was the original Brookside renovation project. So when Dave called me several months ago and said, we have another project we'd like you to begin to help us with, I was very gratified to hear that this was something that had come up, because you paid off that debt now, and it was a very successful undertaking. It was a very successful project. I want to say another thing about the way this county approaches capital borrowing and capital finance. You do your diligence. Every project that I've been involved with, and it's been a lot of them over the last 20 years, you have made sure that you understand the impact of it. You make sure that you've got the ability to absorb it within your game plan, and that you meet certain parameters. So on this project, it's no different. In planning for this project, you have recently adopted a new debt management policy. And that policy has a couple of things in there that identify the fact that you're not going to overextend yourself in terms of the use of debt. You know, in Wisconsin, counties can borrow as much as an amount equal to 5% of their total equalized value. 5% of your total value. Well, this county has adopted its own policy saying that it will never borrow an amount less than 1% of your total equalized value. In fact, you set recently that standard at 0.8%. And so that's one of the measurements or metrics that we look at here to see, is this going to fit within that, under that plan? And we can tell you that it will. We expect that with this borrowing, based upon the fact that it is going to be self-supporting, that offset allows you to remain at 0.78% of your total equalized value. Another measurement is, how does it compare a debt per capita basis, when you take into consideration all of the outstanding borrowing that you have or are planning to have, this borrowing will allow you to remain within your parameter. You don't want to exceed, you've said you do not want to exceed $550 per person in the county. This will keep you under $525, along with all of the other plans that you have on the horizon. And we've looked at this all the way through the year 2021 in terms of your capital planning. All right, let's get into the meat of the capital finance structure itself. Lori just explained to you, and she showed you the breakdown on where the money's going insofar as the project. We're talking about, I won't get to that level of detail, but it's $18.2 million of actual hard project cost. When you do this type of financing, you're going to have additional fees that come into play for a borrowing of that size, and so that has to be added to it to get the total bond amount. We're estimating those fees at about $363,000. That would bring a total borrowing to $18,510,000 to do all of what was described here. You heard Mike talk about the phasing plan. This is going to take a while to get done. It's going to take a 3-year period. So we don't think it's prudent for you to borrow all of that money up front in the first year. Why pay interest on the whole thing? Why not stagger it so that you have the ability to cover these things as you go? We're recommending a 2-step borrowing process. You borrow the first piece, half of it, in the first construction year 2015, and the second in the second year of 2016. We're recommending that you use the maximum length of time that's allowed for general obligation debt to pay these back, and that'd be a 20-year time frame. Because of a project this magnitude, that's in keeping with what you did for the renovation of this facility, public safety building, and any large public building. You used a 20-year plan. For purposes of our estimates, we are estimating an interest rate that is slightly higher than where you are today, but in the ballpark. We're estimating a 3.09% cost of money for these 20-year issues. By the way, the county board, for those that I think everybody was here, you may have heard that you just did a 10-year issue at 1.99%. This would be a little longer, but this is well within the parameter of what's available. We're assuming a 25 basis point increase in the next year to add to that to hedge for market conditions. I know you can't see all of this from that far back, but let me just, you will be getting this in your packet. The important thing is to know where to look for things. And in this spreadsheet here, we've got 2 columns. This 2015 year, the 2016 year are 2 columns of borrowings. You'll see that this particular row adds up to the $18.2 million of total project costs that were mentioned. We have the identified costs of issuance below that here. So these are your costs of issuance. The totals are here. Here's that $362,000. I said $363. We have this total. We offset it with some interest earnings. Oops, I got to go back up. And we have at the bottom the amounts of borrowings. There are 2 borrowings, $9,255,000 in 15 and 16 for a total of $18,510,000. Again, when you get your packet, you'll look at your packet and you'll see this particular spreadsheet in it. The important thing is in this spreadsheet at the top, the first yellow set of columns is the first issue. We have the principal and the interest that gets paid and the estimated interest costs, and totals are down at the bottom. So for that first issue, you'll spend a total of $13,016,000 in total principal and interest. For the second issue, it would be $13,173,000, and for the total, it's $26,189,785 over the entire length of time. So now the real question is, how does that fit in? How are you going to pay? How are you going to cover that? Is there going to be enough money left after you've paid your operating costs to cover this nut? This spreadsheet answers that question. And when you get your packet, look for this one. It's a summary of the longer spreadsheets that Lori talked about. If you want to really get into the details and look at the detailed assumptions, go to Lori's spreadsheet. If you want a quick look at where we are on this project, look at this one. What we've got here is, in the first column, the total revenues of the entire operation. So it ranges from $16 million a year income in the early years to $27 million a year in the later years. We have total operating expenses of starting at 15 million, running out to 25 million in the later years. The difference between the two of those numbers is the net income prior to debt and transfers. The shaded column here that's in the middle of the page is the debt payments. And what we want to be sure of is that we've got enough cash coming in after we've paid our operating costs to pay the net debt, the payments on the debt. Oops. What this tells us is that we do have that. The cash flow prior to the budget transfer is indicating that there's a positive cash flow, and we have about, on an average, about 130% more revenue than we need in order to make the debt payments after you've paid for the operating costs. That's pretty strong coverage. That's pretty good. That provides some cushion. And what that means is that additional 30% is available for some other things, such as transferring some dollars to help you balance your operating budget for the county. And that will be available on an ongoing basis as it's projected. We also have projected then, after you make those budget transfers, what will happen in the early years. There's a line right here in this spreadsheet that shows a point of ramp up, if you will. When I talk on ramp up, I'm talking about that phase-in period, that first 3-year period that Mike talked about during the construction. It's going to take time for you to get fully up to speed in collecting all the revenue that's necessary for this project. During that period, there is going to be some negative cash flow because of all of the moving of people around, et cetera, et cetera. That negative cash flow will build, and we do project about $1,700,000 net deficit at the high point in about 2017. However, we project that that deficit will be able to be self-funded and fully repaid and recovered within 2.5 years of that original amount, so that you can see that in this spreadsheet, we do project a positive cumulative balance beginning in 2020 and then growing out to the year 2036 to the point where you would have a net surplus of $7,848,000 at the end of the day. These numbers are numbers that we didn't make up. These are numbers that were developed by the Brookside staff based on their experience and vetted by the WIPFLi accounting firm that has a vast amount of experience in looking at projects of this type. And so I think that is an important set of assumptions. So in conclusion, for my part, let me just say that the takeaways here from my perspective are, number one, the design of the plan of finance is a design that we think gets you the lowest cost of money, the cheapest way to finance this project. Number two, we think the project has been designed so that it's respectful of your debt policies and falls within the policies that you've adopted and would expect to be adhered to as a county. Thirdly, and I haven't talked about this yet, but it's very important, you know that, and Finance Committee Chairman Rose reported on the rating results that you just had with Standard & Poor's and Fitch. Let me just tell you about the rating folks. They're like you are when it comes to fiscal conservatism. They don't like surprises. You don't like surprises. And so when it comes to projects of this type, it's important when you're going to get yourself rated that you inform them and keep them abreast of and put on the radar screen what your plans are. So you've done that. When we did this rating presentation, County Executive Cruiser was there, and he made a point of indicating to the rating agencies what the plans of the county on the radar were relative to this project. Even though it hasn't been approved by the county yet, we wanted them to be aware of the potential of this and have the opportunity to respond and react to it. I can tell you that it is they made their rating decision with the knowledge of the fact that this project was out there, and they've reaffirmed your AA credit rating in both cases. So I think that that's something that's very important, and you should have some comfort in knowing that this is not, in their judgment, beyond the scope of your capabilities. And finally, I think, again, the projections that have been provided by the county and the county staff were very key and very important, because what they're demonstrating is the ability to meet not only your ongoing operations, but all of the debt obligations. And we are projecting that not just the Brookside debt obligations, but obviously all of the county's debt obligations will continue to be able to be met going forward. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave Gertson, who will wrap this up and will be available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you to the entire presentation team. I really enjoyed working on this project, and you see some of the team up in front here, and a lot of the team is also present tonight, but not up before you. But I really enjoyed working with the team and getting to a comfort level with this project. What you heard tonight was a long-term plan that provides for the sustainability of Brookside. Lori talked about the feasibility of the project and demonstrated how it cash flows. You could see in her report that it's in the black at the end of the term of the project by about $8 million. And tonight we're going to give you a lot of detailed information that demonstrates that. But what you'll see in those numbers is that forecast was very conservative. There's flexibility in this project, and I would expect that at the end of the a little over 20 years of this project we'll actually see that it comes in a little better than that. So this project cash flows, it's in the black and it looks good. One of the things you heard from Fran is that next year will be the 100th anniversary of Brookside, and it's a service that we provided to the community over many decades. But in order to continue to do that, it's had to evolve and it's had to change in order to meet the needs of our citizens. So over 20 years ago, we saw the need to change. We did that, and we're there again today. We need to change. We need to continue to evolve. You heard from the entire project team the way this project was vetted. We did substantial analysis of this. Now, you know that we have some very good internal experts and a good administration team, and we took a really good look at this and as part of the vetting, got to a comfort level with it. But we didn't just rely on our own internal administration. We looked for an independent source outside, and you've heard WIPFLi mentioned many times. WIPFLi is a sound firm with expertise in this arena, and they looked at this project and they also agreed with our analysis. Another person you heard Leading Age mentioned, but Brian Shanick is here tonight. And you heard Mike Harrigan reminisce a little bit about how he was involved in this project 2 decades ago. And there's some others in the room here that were involved in the project 2 decades ago when we decided to build Brookside. And Brian Shanick, along with Al Swartz, who was the project manager, developed that plan 20 years ago. And the thing I'll say, and Al and I kidded each other a little bit, is, will this project work? Is this plan going to work? Well, now here 20 years later, we saw that the plan that we launched at that time worked. Brian Shanick was one of the experts that helped us with that. And so the same person that helped launch a plan that worked 20 years ago is here tonight helping us with that again to evolve to the next phase of Brookside so that we can continue to serve the citizens of our community. The last thing I'll say is I'll talk a little bit about Kenosha Area Business Alliance and talk about the strategic plan. You remember that just right about the time of the Great Recession, CABA undertook a strategic plan, and one of the leading things they said was that we need to develop quality of place. So as our community grows, and I think we all know about a lot of the growth and a lot of things that are happening here, we need to evolve with that too. And Brookside is one of the things the county provides to our community. There's many things we need to do in order to ensure quality of place, but Brookside is one of the great things we do in order to add to the quality of place and ensure a great community and a good place to develop. So with that, I We're going to get into some questions if you like, but I'd just like to pause for a minute. We've talked a lot about a document that we're going to present to you tonight, and I would ask that we distribute that to the county board. And so the team is getting the planning document that we have that we'd like to present to you. And we know there's a lot of detail. What you saw tonight in a little over a 1-hour presentation was a summary. There's a lot of detail in the planning document, so you can take it back and study it. If you have any questions, I can be the primary point of contact for you. I think you have my number there. My number will be in the planning document. But we will address questions using the team approach, and we'll go to the best expert on the team in order to get the best answer for you, so you can feel that you've thoroughly vetted this project and have had a good response to any question that you might have. Okay, with that, we would open it up for questions, but remember, we don't have to address everything tonight. There's a lot of information. It's kind of warm in here, and it's been a long night for you, so don't feel obligated to get every question out on the floor tonight. If there's something you want to get into that's really granular, take some number crunching, let us know about that. The thing we'd love is if you have a question, and we'd love to respond to your question and do whatever analysis it takes to give you a full and complete answer to your question. So, we'd love to be able to do that before you have to make a decision on this. So,
We're yet to the question period right now,
Yeah.
Mr. Garcia? Okay. Supervisor Noble has his light on.
Thank you. I have several, but I'll only ask a couple tonight and get to you for the other ones. But I noticed in the presentation that the 300 wing is being eliminated, and but yet still there's going to be 154 licensed certified nursing facility beds. How does that? How are we going to do that if we eliminated a 20 bed wing?
Fran, you want to take that?
Supervisor Noble, if I understand your question, it's very hard to hear over there. You're getting all this feedback. But if we eliminate the 300 wing, we built a 48-bed rehab. So we're going to have 48 beds of rehab and 106 beds to make 154. So that wing is just going to be redistributed because we have all those new beds with the 48 beds. Does that answer your question?
So the new 48 is configured to be part of the 300 wing that's being eliminated.
Yes, we'll have 48 beds of rehab and 106 beds distributed throughout the rest of the facility that's going to be renovated.
Plus the 24.
Pardon me?
Plus the 24 for the...
The 24 CBRF beds are a different license, but yes.
Okay. Then the other question, you're eliminating, it sounded like you're filling in the courtyard. Is there going to be no courtyard? Because my father's been in a couple different nursing homes, and one of my favorite parts was taking them out into the courtyard.
The architect.
Thanks for the question. The drawings that were presented are conceptual drawings, and we may look at exterior spaces that are secure for memory care, because it is important that there are exterior spaces. But again, they're conceptual drawings at this point.
Yeah, I'd like to see, well, I don't know what whatever staff feels, but I think with baby boomers, because I am one, getting outside and getting some fresh air is nice. And then, years ago when we built, I was here for the 20 years ago, we built the existing nursing home. I can't believe it's 20 years, but there was like a formula for getting reimbursed from the state over the course of 20 years. Is there anything available in that, along those lines now, for reimbursement from the state for the capital projects?
There is a $10 per day revenue that we would get when we build this. That'll help fund the construction.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Noble. Supervisor Ritzloff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the really big questions on this is Medicare. There's no one in this country that can guarantee what Medicare is going to reimburse by the year 2036. We're relying on all your projections that Medicare is, you made assumptions. From where? That there's no one, how could we possibly predict even past the year 2016 what Medicare is going to look like? The United States is in a $17 trillion debt. Medicare with the Affordable Care Act is about to take a $650 billion hit in the year 2018, by 2018. I'm just, I just really want to know, before I think more about this, is how you can possibly make a Medicare projection through all that income, for all those years. If you're just assuming today's reimbursement rate with a little health inflation trend, I think that's disingenuous, because we can't rely on that. I'm in that business, and no one knows what's going to happen to Medicare. No one. If it's even going to be there by 2030, it's projected to be bankrupt. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Question or comment?
Well, a question for him, or is that a comment?
Comment.
Okay, so we're going to go on to the next individual, will be Supervisor Grady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to refer to page 10 in the booklet that's been handed out here. And the bottom point is projections based upon capacity for CBRFs, community-based residential facilities.
We've got to get IT on this.
We know that we have a number in our community. We know that there may be more coming online, so it's not my point this evening to delve into that, but I think going forward, we need to have some type of market analysis presented to the county board to just know, in the general southeastern Wisconsin area, what the competition is, how we fit in, and if it really truly is something where we're going to be in the forefront, or if we're going to be following the curve with these types of facilities. So that's my comment. Thank you.
That's a comment.
Okay. Supervisor Decker.
Just a few questions. I'm going to slide 8. You have CBRF as a type of assisted living and stands for community-based residential facility. Clients require 3 or less hours of nursing care per day, and there is much less regulation. Can you give an example of what a CBRF is, just so I can, put it to something? Because I can see what a SNF is, because we have that now. I know what rehab is. What is a CBRF? Is that, so I can draw a picture in my head?
The key word in CBRF is community. It's more community-based, it's not institutional. The residents, the people who live there require less care. You don't have to have the intense staff that we have to have in the nursing home. They can get out and do more things. They might do their own shopping, but they also can't live alone. They might need some assistance with 1 or 2 of the activities of daily living, which are eating, dressing, cooking. They might need assistance with walking. They just no longer live at home anymore, but they don't need a nursing home yet.
Okay, so
Does that
it's kind
answer?
of like an assisted living facility?
That is a CBRF is an assisted living facility.
Okay,
Assisted living covers CBRFs, and it also covers the apartment complexes with help in it, too.
okay, thank you, that, just so I can picture that. So the plan is 48 beds for rehab and 24 beds for the CBRF. How did we come to those two numbers? Aside from the fact they're divisible by 12, because the communities are 12 beds or 12 rooms.
That's a really good question, because originally I think we had 42 in the rehab. And then we talked with Brian Schoenig from Leading Age, and he said, you know, you should bump that up because you really should look at your staffing efficiencies. So we know what our patient care ratio is, and so we, discussed it with the director of nursing, and she agreed, because by bumping it up to 48, we would have the exact amount of staff to be able to take care of 48, rather than not enough staff to take care of 42, but too much to take, you know what I mean? And we did the exact same thing in the CBRF. We looked at efficiencies of staff to come up with that number.
Okay, so anything more, you'd have to hire. Anything less, you'd have
Too
not
much
extra
staff.
people, but
Right.
too much. Okay. The projections, obviously, we're doing this because of the baby boomers and the aging population of the baby boomers. How long will the growth in this field last because of the baby boomer generation? Do we have a projection of that? Like, are we expected that this is going to be a 20-year trend, a 30-year trend, or do we know that number? Because you hate to talk about it, but, eventually the baby boom generation is going to die.
Yep. But the good news is all of the generations are going to die at some point.
That's true, but
It's not just the baby boomers.
yes, I know, but
But
trends have
Supervisor Decker, I do
trends have
have,
followed the baby boomers since
Right.
they were born. So the trends just go with the flow with the baby boomers. So eventually, they're going to die, and that trend is going to die off because of that.
Supervisor Decker, I do have that number, and I can get back to you with it. I just
Okay.
don't have it at the top of my head, unless somebody else remembers what it was.
Okay. And then I just want to clarify, so to follow up on Supervisor Noble's, so we'll actually have 106 SNF beds, 48 rehab beds, and then 24 CBRF beds after this, is that correct?
Almost. We're going to have 24 CBRF beds, which is a separate license, and we're going to have 154 SNF beds. 48 of those are going to be in that rehab facility that's specifically designed for rehab, but they will all come under our license of SNF. We will not be changing our nursing home license.
Oh, okay, so then, to follow up, on slide 61, you have this estimated cost, so when you have something in here, and it's probably hard for you to look at or know off the top of your head, but you have numbers where it says, like, the CBRF dollar amounts for debt service and the SNF, so the SNF number includes that 48 rehab beds. Okay, all right, thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you, Supervisor Decker. Supervisor Skolitsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a quick question. Mike, you had made the comment regarding you're planning to roof this with asphalt shingles. Is that the entire facility?
Yeah, let's get it on the mic here.
Yes, the question is, do we intend to use asphalt shingles on the entire building? On the existing building, the roof is in good condition. On the new building, where we have gabled roofs, we will use asphalt shingles to match the existing.
Has the analysis been done for permanent roofing or steel or aluminum roofing as opposed to asphalt? They only last so long, and I'm looking at this being a 20-year, 25 years. Shingled roofs don't last that long. Next thing you know, we're having to put a new roof on it. They're not inexpensive.
Right.
But there's also a cost trade-off.
Right, that's it. Currently, we'd estimate 40-year shingles on a project like this, 30 or 40-year shingles, which is a standard material we would use in construction, and that's what's in the budget right now.
Can that analysis be done? Because I don't believe any asphalt shingle roof will last 40 years. They may claim it. I don't believe it.
Sure, we can follow up on that.
Okay. The other thing was is that we raised that property that we purchased maybe a year ago, put a parking lot there. It seems as though that parking is a long ways from the facility. Is that the best usage for that particular piece of property? Or have some other scenarios been done to allow, because even if it's staff, it's still a long ways, and we don't always have the greatest weather.
Right. Yes, we did have 12 scenarios that we went through, and there were different building options where there was an RCAC located in that lot at one point, a CBRF was located over there, and just due to the removal of it from the not being connected to the building reduced staff efficiency, and the financial models did not work with the standalone buildings. So we did look at 12 different options, and several of them did have buildings over there. So staff parking actually is limited. So it was important that we have ample parking for the CBRF and the RCAs, or the CBRF and the rehab center. So it was added over there, and we're maximizing parking on the loop also, and it was still coming up short. So actually it is the best use of that lot for the current configuration.
And I know it's just a rendering, but I'm assuming there'll be some sidewalks or pathways put through there so that otherwise they'll get created.
Yeah, sidewalks.
That's all I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Colmeyer.
Oh, sure. In the handouts that you all have, there's a tab that calls out the appendix. Back there are roughly 90 drawings that date back from the first concepts all the way through. And those are not the concepts that we ended up with, but they are all the iterations that we went through to get to the final concept. So there you can see some of the options with the RCAC and the CBRF over in the lot where the current residential house is now.
Okay. Is that it, Supervisor Skowski? Supervisor Colmeyer, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to all the presenters. It was very, very great information, comprehensive. I really appreciate all the information, so thank you. Just really one quick question on the 24-bed CBRF. Is that a private pay scenario, or is that a Medicare, Medicaid?
There's 4 Medicaid beds, and the rest are private pay.
Okay, that was my question.
Thank you, Supervisor Colmeyer. Supervisor Arrington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, Supervisor Colmeyer, I had the same question, but I'll say something very brief. You all are to be commended at this point. I think the information that you brought forward to this board is very organized. It's very thought through very well. I know that you all cannot possibly answer every question that we have for you tonight, seeing that we're in the initial stages. But I wanted to personally tell you thank you. The presentation was informative. I learned a lot about what your intentions are with the Brookside project, and I really look forward to seeing the outcome of this here through our board. So thank you. You all did a wonderful job on working and preparing this for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Arrington. Supervisor Poole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to commend everybody also for all the work you did on this project, and just a comment on the interest rate projections here. I know the Federal Reserve is committed to keeping interest rates low, but I think that the 3% rate is very optimistic, considering, like Supervisor Retzloff said, the $17 trillion debt we have in this country. So that's just my comment. I think the 3% rate is very optimistic. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Poole, for your comment. Supervisor Hallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do, like my colleague here to my right, want to commend all of the presenters. This was an exceptionally well-packaged presentation. Much of what's been talked about with the CBRF model and some of the other things, making this more community, family-like living, is not outside the scope of what's normal. This is being done everywhere. And I don't think in our doing this, we wouldn't be behind the curve. We would either be just a little bit ahead of it or perhaps even right with it. So it makes good sense for us to do this. And I've heard a few things that have been interesting from some of my other colleagues, and I'm not one to entertain Chicken Little scenarios, Mr. Chairman. I realize we have enough intelligence among us to roll with them and move forward appropriately. So this looks good, and I look forward to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Hallman. Seeing no other lights at this time. Well, I'm going to clear the board and then I'll light you up, okay? Go ahead, Supervisor Grady.
Unless I missed it, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unless I missed it through the chair to Mr. Geertsen, was there projections made upon staffing levels as they are currently and what they will be in the completed scenario? I completely eclipsed that train of thought. Could you elaborate for us?
The staffing levels are, the only area we have increases in staffing is in the CBRF because it's a new facility and we're adding the staff for that. But the basic formula that we've always used for Brookside is we staff to the census. So we're continuing to staff to the census. We're at 154 today. We'll be at 154 in this plan. So this plan is not something that drives new staffing other than the CBRF, which I think you can see that it cash flows with the new staff we need, to run that.
So I guess I'm still not clear. With the CBRF and the new inclusion of additional beds, that's already budgeted to add personnel, or you're saying personnel will be added as those fill?
Well, I'll have Lori comment on the CBRF.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Okay. The question is, will we increase the staff in the CBRF as the beds fill, or are we going to staff it all from day one? And then, so I think
Oh,
I'll
no,
let
it'll
Lori.
be phased in, yeah, because it's going to take a while to get 100% occupied. And so we'll phase in whatever the staffing ratio is, we will meet that.
So based with these budget projections then, we're still based upon 154 Brookside personnel, is that the concept?
Yeah, 154 beds in the skilled nursing facility, and then 24 beds in the CBRF. We're not changing, like as Fran just said, we're not changing the license. It's still 154 beds.
Okay,
it's
so
just redistributed on the campus different.
Okay, so I stand corrected. It's 154 beds. Our current census for Brookside personnel is, what did you say, Fran? About 200 and how many staff do we have currently at Brookside?
200 full and part-time.
Exact number?
Approximately.
We have probably 225.
But
225.
that's full-time and part-time?
Correct.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're about 160 FTE,
Okay.
full-time equivalents.
So when I look through this documentation here as it's presented here, will I see any variation from the 225 current Brookside employees we have to reflect expanded beds and capacity here?
Just for the SNF?
In its entirety, yes.
Okay, just for the skilled nursing, no, side, but you will see additional staff on the CBRF. There's an administrator, there's CNAs, and there's
Okay.
Other support staff.
Is that documentation in our paperwork here?
Yes.
Okay, that's my
Yes.
question. Thank you,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Grady. We'll go back to Supervisor Skolitsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had one other thing that I wanted to ask, and that is, obviously, we've got some private sector entities that are out there performing the same services. And there's a shift here between what we're doing in Medicare and managed care and Medicaid. Does that ratio line up with more or less what the private sector is doing? And we don't want to be, the intent, I don't think, originally was not to be in competition, government against private sector. On the other hand, we do have an obligation here to service the community. And I'm wondering if are we falling in line with that? Is our approach different than what the private sector is? And if it is, how would that come about financially? And I don't think we can answer it tonight, it's late, but it's just something to maybe think about.
So we could do a comparable to the private sector as a future, as an answer to your question in the future.
Yeah, I just don't want our government to be in competition with the private sector. But although we are, and I also don't want it to become a burden. That's why I like the way that this proposal was put together, because it's taking a burden off the taxpayer and trying to make it self-sustaining. That's excellent. But also, are we now eliminating some of the community to keep ourselves profitable, where maybe that's not our intent? I'm just asking as a general question, okay?
We can
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
look at the market, and we can look at the comparables to the private sector, and we've got the resources to do that.
Thank you, Supervisor Skolitsky. Supervisor Hallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to sort of tag on to the back of that, it might be helpful, and I think it's probably already online, but perhaps if staff could email to us the link for the previous study that was done addressing Brookside and the private sector and what that looked like for Kenosha County and where some of that stuff was going, which would provide a bit better background in terms of answering that particular question. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other lights, I want to thank county staff, administration, our architectural firm, our bond counsel, and all the people that had some doings in this presentation tonight. I want to thank all of you for your due diligence and hanging with us this evening to a late hour. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your support in this matter. I'd like to get a motion for adjournment from somebody. Motion to adjourn from Ronald Frederick, seconded by Mike Gable. All in favor?